Hello. Yes. Hi. Yeah.
Yes.
Can you see my screen?
Yes. It's very excellent and
Thank you.
very much visible. Coins of
Fantastic.
Classical India, you have titled.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. So, so I don't know if you saw my bio. Hello, everyone. I don't know if you saw my bio, but my name is Azeem Ali, and I studied international relations at the University of Kent, and then I studied modern history with Sunil Kilnani at the Indian Institute, and I studied history for further level at the University of Cambridge, and I assisted a museum in Cambridge with their coins.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Yes, you may proceed.
Yeah.
I have introduced you in a very brief manner to my students, and they would be knowing you more and more the way you are going to speak and elaborate the subject. So
Yes.
your deliberation would be something like your introduction. So you kindly please proceed.
Okay, sure. So, as many of you would have seen, so the topic of this talk will be the coins of classical India, from the Mahajanapads to the Kushans. So, first I'm going to start with, so why do we use coins, and why do we have them today? So their metal value has given them kind of greater purchasing power, especially when compared to cowrie shells, which were used for a long time during the Bronze Age, especially around the Indian Ocean as well. And they could be traded on the basis of their bullion value, which is the price based on the supply and demand for precious metals. And they were kind of portable forms of bullion. And a good comparison is the practice, which some of you may very well know, of keeping gold and silver in India as a form of financial security. Like in the form of jewelry, it's quite common to keep gold. So it's kind of based on a kind of a similar logic behind coins when they were first introduced. And examples kind of in more closer to a time of kind of the importance of precious metals is during the First World War, when Britain, the British government in India, under colonial rule, sold off India's gold reserves to kind of stabilize the rupee. And then closer to our time, from 1945 to 1971, you had the Bretton Woods system, where a lot of currencies around the world were tied to the value of precious metals, particularly gold. And that came to the end in 1971. And these days, as some of you would know, that coinage in today's day and age are normally smaller denominations of kind of paper currency, which is much more common in the modern age. So first I'm going to look at the very beginnings of trade and how that developed into the trade of precious metals, and then how that became coins. And the very first phase of trade at a sophisticated level in India was the Indus Valley civilization, which I'll refer to as the IVC. And the IVC traded with neighboring civilizations such as the Elamites in Iran, the Sumerians in Iraq, and civilizations found in India. And the IVC developed a system to measure the weight of commodities for its barter system. And there's been some debate of whether the appearance of precious metals at Indus Valley sites with bartering may actually represent an early form of coinage. So nobody really knows, because we can't read their language yet. And but archaeologists in India believe that the Indus Valley civilization saw the development of a sophisticated mass measurement system, and this led to the emergence of the rupee. And I'm sure the rupee must be familiar to some of you as well, because it's often used today by jewelers in India as a unit of measurement, and it's very uniform. And it's been a continual use since the Indus Valley civilization. And 8 rupees are equivalent to 1 masha. And the multiples of a masha form a standardized system of measurements which were used in the IVC, and where the highest form of measurement was 128 rupees. And with the demise of the IVC and the rise of the Iron Age kingdoms across India, the system of rupees was developed further. which heralded the beginning of true coinage in India. And the Iron Age in India was known as the Mahajanapada Era, which I'm going to look at shortly. Just giving you like a minute or two just so you can just see what's in front of you before I move ahead, because I know it's quite a bit. So, yeah. So here's a map of the Mahajanapads and the kingdoms I'm going to be looking at and referring to. So the main kingdom I'm going to be looking at, don't know if you can see my mouse on your screen, but I'm going to be first looking at Gandara, which had one of the main cities was Takshila, which was a very famous center of learning in ancient India. I'm going to look at them first because they were kind of just adjacent to the Achaemenid Empire. So whenever kind of foreign invasions came into India, they were often the first kingdom to be kind of coming under their influence due to their proximity to the Khyber Pass. And then I'm going to look at Kingdom of Kashi, which is centered on Varanasi, and Kosala, which is centered on initially on Sravasti, and then later the famous city of Ayodhya. And then Magadha, which was the kingdom which is obviously would become the most powerful of these kingdoms, with the capital at Rajgir, and then later its capital was Patna. And I'm going to briefly refer, but not look at the coins of Kuru and Surasena, but just for the sake of time. So first I'm going to start looking at Gandhara. So the Mahajanapada era saw a further refinement of the Rati system, where 100 Ratis developed into the Satyabhana, which was the name used for the first silver coins minted in India. It is debated how much of this was influenced by the Persian Empire to the west, which had just adopted coinage after conquering the Kingdom of Lydia in present-day Turkey, which is considered by many scholars in the Western world to be the traditional birthplace for coinage. And ancient Greek and Achaemenid coins have been found in Pushkalavati, in what was the Achaemenid province of Gadara, better known as Gandara. And here's a kind of one of the such coins found in coin hoards in Pushkalavati in Gandara. So this is an Athenian tetradrachma, which is ubiquitous all over. I mean, it was traded across the Persian Empire, being found all over the Eastern Mediterranean. So some have ended up as far east as, India. So, and these often had test marks in this case, it's maybe damage, but in many cases, there's test marks to show their purity. And these were known as owls because of the owl on the reverse, and then often depicted with an olive sprig behind the owl, and then a depiction of Athena. And these coins are highly valued even today by collectors, especially when you have the full depiction of the helmet. If the helmet's completely shown on the obverse, then the value and rarity of these coins increase. And these coins were minted with silver from a silver mine near Athens. So it's amazing to think that these came so far east, thousands of miles away from Athens. And these were probably also highly valued for the bullion value, so the silver value, based on its supply and demand in the silver market. And these are, this is an Achaemenid silver coin, so these would have also circulated around the Persian Empire. And again, these would have circulated in India as well. These are known as sigloi, and these were minted in Lydia, in what is now Western Turkey. And this particular coin is known as the crouching king type. So the king here is either kind of Darius I or Xerxes I, who is famous tradition for the invasions of Greece. So and then you can see these banker marks made by a banker who would have handled this coin and kind of wanted to verify its purity. So obviously this coin kind of passed that test. And these are quite the level of artistry is obviously less, I would say, compared to the Greek coins, but these were meant also just for their bullion, so the value of silver in the Persian Empire. So what the supply and demand was. And then here is a punch mark coin, which has also been found alongside ancient Greek and Persian coins. So I'm going to be referring to them as PMCs. And it's quite interesting that you find these three type of coins in just one region in the northwest part of India. And again, these are kind of simple punch marks made on pieces of silver. So we're going to move on to punch mark coins. So the numismatist Dr. Pankaj Tandon has argued that the discovery of punch mark coinage among Achaemenid coin hoards in Gandara are the strongest evidence that silver coinage is actually indigenous to India, especially since Achaemenid coiners struck in Lydia were quite different. He argues that Indian bankers would not have taken easily to new forms of coinage, and this meant that existing coinage continued to be minted under the Achaemenids. And thus the earliest form of coinage in India may have existed before the formation of the Achaemenid Empire. And the Achaemenid Empire was formed around the mid-6th century BC. So there's evidence to suggest that coinage was already in existence for about 50 years by that time. And now we're going to look at the earliest use of PMCs or punch mark coins in India. So the earliest that we know of are the kingdoms of Kashi, Kosala, and Magadha, and they date from about 600 BC onwards. And first, we're going to look at the coinage of Kashi, and which was centered on Varanasi. And here is a silver punch mark coin of the Kashi Janapad, struck between 600 BC and 465 BC. And you can see here that it's been completely obliterated here by the number of counter marks, banker marks, I should say. It's just, one cannot really make out because it all kind of jumbled together, because clearly this had gone through many kind of cities or towns. One can make out a chakra here, which we'll see later on in other coins, particularly in the Ganga valleys. So it's just interesting to see. And Kashi was initially the dominant kingdom in the middle Ganga valley, and was centered on Varanasi, as I mentioned. And it first ceded some of its land to Kosala, and then later both Kashi and Kosala were annexed by Magadha. And coins of the Kashi Janapad, including coins of this type, have been found in Babua, Kemo district in Bihar, and Jakania, Ghazipur district in Uttar Pradesh, which is about 70 kilometers north of Varanasi. And here is a silver punch mark coin known as a Vimshataka, struck in Kashi under Kosala rule from about 525 BC to 465 BC. And again, you can see a lot of banker marks on the obverse here and on the reverse. And now I'm going to look at the Kingdom of Kasala. So the Kingdom of Kasala was centered initially on Sravasti, and then the famous city of Ayodhya. And it was a powerful kingdom, and it's famous for being the homeland of Lord Ram. And Lord Mahavir of the Jains also taught in the region. And according to British colonial gazetteers, its vast territory stretched from Ayodhya in the west, eastwards to include the Purvanchal region of Uttar Pradesh, as well as western Bihar, including both Saran and Siwan districts. And Kasala coins have been found in Begusarai in central Bihar, and Rai Bareli district in Awadh in Uttar Pradesh. And they've been found near Lucknow. And unfortunately for Kasala, it was very close to Magadha, so this made it a target of Magadha, especially under the expansionist kind of campaigns of King Ajatasashtru, who was a very ambitious king. And now I'm going to look at the Kingdom of Magadha. So here, it's just going to show a punch mark coin of Kasala, struck between 600 BC and 465 BC. This is known as a bull type. I've been told, yeah, this is a bull type. I'm not sure if it's associated with Nandi, who's associated with Lord Shiva, but what I find interesting as well is not just the bull, but also the chakra here again. So that's a kind of recurring motif. So looking at the Kingdom of Magadha now. So the Kingdom of Magadha would become the most powerful of the Janapads. And its first capital was Rajgir. And then it moved north to Patliputra, which is modern-day Patna in Bihar. And its period of expansion began under King Ajatasattu of the Haryanka dynasty. And King Ajatasattu's mother was Queen Kosala Devi of Kasala. And his lineage from his mother allowed him to lay claim to and conquer both Vaishali, which was just immediately to the north of Magadha, and Kosala, which is also nearby, which made Magadha a very powerful kingdom. And King Ajatasattu was also a contemporary, it's believed, of Lord Mahavir and Lord Buddha. And the coinage of Magadha, it kind of starts from about the 5th century BC onwards, and they initially weighed about 7.6 grams, and then they were reduced to about 5.5 grams. And these coins were initially known as mashakas, which, as I discussed earlier, were derived from the Rati system, and shows continuity from the early development of the Rati system. And Kashapanas were introduced later, and were struck at a weight of about 3.5 grams or less. And the reduction of weight may have actually been done to deter bankers from obliterating the coins with their countermarks. And many of the coins have a 6-arm countermark, which is traditionally associated with Magadha. So if you see these countermarks, then likely it passed through Magadha at some point. And here is a stupa of King Ajatasattu, the king of Magadha. I took this picture in Rajgir in the Nalanda district a few years ago in December 2018 on my way from Nalanda to Bodh Gaya. And here is a silver 25 mashaka of Magadha, struck in the 5th century BC. It's about 5.43 grams, and you can see here a chakra and a 6-arm countermark of Magadha. But on this earlier coin issue, there's not much in terms of countermarks on the reverse. But then as you go kind of forward in time, then as the coins get smaller, then you start seeing even more kind of countermarks. And I think that looks like a bull here. And then here you can see a chakra here, and then the 6-arm countermark of Magadha. So actually, as coins became lighter and smaller, then you start seeing more countermarks. So they did not achieve their purpose, unfortunately, in this sense, that to deter countermarks. And now I'm going to look at how, so after the Haryanka dynasty, they were succeeded by the Sheshunga dynasty in the 4th century BC. And the Shishunga dynasty, they expanded the power of Magadha kind of towards the southwest from the Ganga Valley, so into what is now Ujjain and Vidisha in Madhya Pradesh. And here is the silver Kasapana of the Shishunga dynasty, struck in about 350 BC. And these banker marks appear on both the obverse and reverse now. So you can see it's been completely obliterated because there's so many counter marks now. There's quite a jumble of them. So you can see the chakra here, you can see an animal here, I think. I'm not sure which animal that is, and then I think this might be an elephant, but I'm not sure. And then this is a chakra and a chakra, so the chakras are all over the coin. And now I'm going to move on to the Nanda dynasty. So the Nandas came after the Shishungas, so they overthrew them. And under them, there was a renewed expansion of the power of Magadha. So the Magadha Empire is expanded up the Ganga River and up the Yamuna, and they conquered the kingdoms of Surasena and Kuru. And as a result of this, they became kind of the great regional power in India. And as a result, Magadha coinage starts becoming pretty much dominant along the whole course of the Ganga, pretty much. So you can see the extent here, how big their territory was. So right from down here in Odisha into Bengal and Bihar, and then Jharkhand as well, Uttar Pradesh, right up to Indraprastha, which is obviously Delhi today, down into Madhya Pradesh, and right down into the south of India. And this is a silver Kasapana of Mahajanapada Nanda, the founder of the Nanda Empire, struck around the 4th century BC. And you can see again a lot of continuity from the coins before. So again, silver coins, and again the kind of similar counter marks again, especially the chakra once again. So a lot of continuity, because this made it easier for bankers to accept a new coinage, even if there was a change of regime in the Magadha capital. So trade could continue as before. And here is a half Kasapana. This is an overstrike minted in Kuru. And this quite possibly was minted under Magadha rule because of this arrow counter mark. It's not 6 arrows, but this arrow counter mark may very well have been added by a mint worker under the Magadha Empire. The Nanda Empire. And then with the Nanda Empire, at the same time this was happening, you had the arrival of the Greeks in the Indus Valley, particularly around Punjab, and they were kind of the main kind of challenge to the Nanda rule coming from the northwest. So Azam the Great, he reached the Beas River here, which is known as F.S.S, and the Nanda Empire was just beyond by this time. And after reaching the Beas, his troops kind of mutinied because of the threat of the Nanda Empire, and then he retreated back down the Indus River, down to Sindh, and then back across Balochistan overland. And then he sent a fleet with some of his troops back along the Arabian Sea and the Persian Gulf back to Iraq, where he died. And the military strength of the Nanda Empire was considerable. And this was sufficient to kind of deter Azan the Great from continuing further. And the Nanda Empire was said to be able to field thousands of infantry, cavalry, and elephants. And this would have terrified the troops of Azan the Great because they just fought elephants at the Jhelum River against Rajapuru. So it would have definitely put them off. So these two empires were kind of bordering each other. And with Azan the Great's arrival in Punjab, we start seeing the true kind of introduction of Greek-style coinage in India. And here is a decadrachma of Azan the Great. So the Greek coinage had kind of multitudes as well of denominations. So a decadrachma was a 10 drachma. And this was a coin struck in Babylon, in Mesopotamia, which is now Iraq. And there's only 10 of these in existence. So these are extremely rare coins. And the obverse shows Azan the Great spearing Mahut and an elephant rider and his master on an elephant. And then the reverse shows Azan the Great standing with a spear in his left arm and a thunderbolt, which traditionally was associated with the Greek god Zeus, and this to illustrate power. And then the Greek goddess Nike giving him the wreath of victory, because Nike was the goddess of victory in Greek mythology. And here is an Indian imitation of Azan the Great tetradrachma. It's another kind of denomination of the drachma. This is struck in Arakosia in present-day Kandahar in Afghanistan. And you can tell that this has kind of been done by an Indian die engraver in a mint workshop, because of the eyes, which is characteristic of Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great coin struck in India. So the eyes have kind of Indian style, so it's more stylized. And this particular type has Alexander the Great as Hercules with a lion scalp, and then the Greek god Zeus on the reverse, seated on a throne, and often holding a bird, but in this case an eagle, to symbolize power. And Azan the Great's generals bickered over what remained of Alexander's empire after his untimely demise in 323 BC. And among the generals was King Ptolemos and Seleucus, who bickered over what remained of the Alexander's empire for his untimely demise in 323 BC. And Seleucus seized territory in Mesopotamia and marched onwards to the Indus River. And the Indus Valley was in a state of upheaval after Alexander's conquests in India. And unfortunately for Seleucus, in the midst of this chaos, there was a new rising power in the east, Chandragupta Maurya. And Chandragupta Maurya had just overthrown the Nanda Dynasty and established the famous to many people in India, the Mauryan Empire. And the Mauryans fought to claim much of Alexander's former conquests in Afghanistan and the Indus Valley, which was subsequently ceded to Chandragupta Maurya. And Seleucus married off his own daughter to Chandragupta Maurya, and in return, Seleucus received elephants, which he used to good effect against his rival, Ptolemos in the Middle East. And coinage of Seleucus' successor, Antiochus I, has been found in India, which indicates continued trade between the Seleucids and the Mauryans. And here is one of those coins that were found in India. So this is found in Karur in Karnataka, in the south of India. And this was minted in about 270 BC. And the test mark you can see here was likely done by a local money tester. And you can see the kind of very strong artistic tradition that come from Greece. Was, this would have been seen by traders in India. And this is, a lot of Greek kings were depicted with a headband around their head. And then on the reverse, then you have always a deity, and then here it says Basileus in Greek, king, and Antiochus here on the left in Greek. And the coinage of Chandragupta Maurya was a continuation of that of his Magadha predecessors. This would continue under his grandson Ashoka the Great, whose rule would see the Mauryan Empire stretch from Kandahar to the Ganga and south into the Deccan. And Mauryan coinage had been found across India. And this is the kind of fine spots of Mauryan coins across India. So right from the northwest, Peshawar, right down into the Yamuna and Ganga valleys, including Varanasi, down to Bengal, and right out west into Gujarat and Sindh, and then south deep into what is now Andhra Pradesh and Telangana almost. And here is a silver Kasapana of the Mauryan Empire, struck between the 4th and 2nd century BC. And you can see the obverse here, many countermarks. You can see the same old from before, the 6-arm countermark here. And then you can see a chakra here. And this countermark is quite interesting because these 3 concentric circles kind of join together in the middle with this kind of line or rod. Some numismatists actually believe this might actually be linked with the Emperor Ashoka. And thanks to Chandragupta Maurya's Prime Minister Kautilya, also famously known as Chanakya, we actually know how coins of this period were made. So Kautilya actually describes in his book, the Arthashastra, how the coins were made. So the metal was melted and purified with alkalis and beaten into sheets and cut into pieces. And subsequently, the symbols were punched on these pieces. And since the pieces had to be cut and clipped, and to make them conform to a particular weight, coins were made in all kinds of shapes and sizes. And sometimes metal of the desired weight was melted and was either poured on a flat board to take its own shape and made into pellets, which were then flattened. And after Ashoka, the kings that succeeded him were quite weak. So by about 220 BC, the empire grew quite weak, and you start seeing die-cast coinage being minted in Taxila. And these were struck in bronze and used symbols which are reminiscent of earlier Mauryan coins. And further south in the Iran Vidisha region in eastern Malwa in Madhya Pradesh, coinage also began to be struck as the Mauryan Empire grew weak and later collapsed during the 2nd century BC. And these coins were minted in the form of punchmark copper coinage. And these coinages came to an end with the rise to power of the Satyavana Dynasty in the south of India. And here is one of the coins. So this was a local coin struck in Taxila, and with a on a single die. So just one face has an image minted on it. It's from about 220 to 185 BC. And this is a 3/4 bronze Kasapana. It's an anonymous issue struck in Ujjain, which is now in Madhya Pradesh, in central India, struck in the 2nd century BC. And you can notice here on the obverse, you can see this countermark here, which is typical of that region. And we'll see it later with the Satyavana Dynasty, this kind of 4 circles joined together. And note how also these also struck on one side, so these are single die coins as well. And by 185 BC, the Mauryan Empire finally collapsed when the last Mauryan emperor, Brihadratha Maurya, was assassinated by General Pushyamitra Shunga, who went on to establish the Shunga Empire. And Shunga coinage strongly resembled that of the Mauryans, and they marked a renewal of Magadha power in North India, although it was contested by the invasions of the Greco-Bactrians in India, and whose kingdom was centered on Sagala after they established their power in Punjab. And from the south, the Satyavana dynasty also challenged their power. And here is a silver Kasapana of Pushyamitra Shunga, struck between 185 and 149 BC. And here's a map just to show the relative political situation in India at the time. So you can see here that the Shunga Empire controlled pretty much lands from the Ganga and Brahmaputra right up to Malwa. And in the south they bordered the Satyabhana Empire, and in the northwest the territory bordered the Indo-Greek kingdoms. So I'm going to look at the Satyavana dynasty next. The Satyavana dynasty was established in present-day Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Maharashtra after the collapse of the Mauryan Empire. And their coins initially depicted elephants on the obverse, before moving towards portraits, which were influenced by their neighbors, particularly the Greeks, who traded with them. And the Satyavahanas grew wealthy on trade with the Roman Empire, and would continue to rule until the collapse of the empire in the 3rd century AD. So it lasted for quite a long time. Here is a coin of King Satakani of the Satyavana Empire, struck in Vidarbha Mint in Maharashtra in the 1st century BC. And here is a silver drachma. This is a more kind of Greek influence coin of King Vesitiputra Pulomave, struck in the Satyavana Empire in the 1st century AD. You can see here the same reverse kind of countermark here, similar to what was found in the Iran-Vidisha region before. And then a highly stylized portrait on the obverse. Now I'm going to look at going back to this map, because we've covered the Shunga and Satyavahana, so now we're going to look at the Indo-Greek cities. So the Indo-Greeks can trace their origins to the rebellion of the Seleucid Empire's satrap Didotus I, who succeeded in 256 BC and founded the Greco-Bactrian kingdom centered on Bactra in Balkh, Afghanistan. And Didotus I dynasty would last for about 20 years or so, 20, 30 years or so, and would end at between 230 and 220 BC, when his son Didotus II was overthrown by Euthydemus, who founded his own dynasty. And after seeing off the threat of a Seleucid invasion under Antiochus III in 210 BC, the position of Euthydemus was secure, and then they could turn their focus to India. And Euthydemus' son Demetrius invaded India after the Shungas had overthrown the Mauryans. And by about 175 BC, Greek rule was established in Punjab, and it was centered on the Sagala, which is present-day Sialkot. And from this time began the Indo-Greeks, and their coinage was based on Hellenistic types. And this is a gold stater of Didotus I. Again, he's depicted with a headband, and then his titles here in Greek, this time struck in the name of King Antiochus, as he was still a subject of him. So Basileus Antiochus, and then deity on the reverse from Greek mythology. And here's a gold state of Euthydemus I, who overthrew Didotus II. Again, very similar. And it says Basileus, King Euthydemu. So King Euthydemus, and with the deity on the reverse. And then under Euthydemus' successor, Demetrius I, we see kind of Indian influence starting to come on the coinage. So this is struck between 200 and 180 BC. And see this elephant scalp here. So this is considered to be a symbol of his conquest in India. And this is some of the highest degree of craftsmanship anywhere in the Greek world. So they're very beautiful coins. And this says Basileus. And then it says Dimitru. King Demetrius. Again with the deity on the reverse. And under Demetrius' successor, Pantaleon, we start seeing bronze coinage struck in Gandara between 185 and 180 BC. And these are the first, and it's actually believed that this is depicts the goddess Lakshmi. And then on the reverse, Basileus Pantaleon, King Pantaleon. And his successor, Agathocles, struck coinage as well. And on the obverse, there's Greek script again. And it says Basileus Agathocles with Balarama Samkashana here depicted on the obverse. And then on the reverse, you have Kharosthi script, which is a script used in India. And this depicts Vasudeva Krishna. It's a very nice depiction with the chakra. And under Agathocles' successor, Apollodorus I, we start seeing the standardization of Indo-Greek coinage with the Greek obverse and the Kharosthi Prakrit reverse. And Prakrit was the main kind of language used in India at the time and would have been easily intelligible to the local population. here is a coin of King Apollodotus I, struck between 174 and 165 BC. The reverse here might actually depict Nandi, who's associated with Lord Shiva. And here it says Basileus Apollodotu, King Apollodotus. An elephant here on the obverse. And under the successor of Apollodotus, under the first Sota, the Indo-Greeks reached the peak of their power. So from his capital in Sialkot, which was known as Sagala, he campaigned against the Shunga dynasty. And according to some historians, including the Greek historian Strabo, his conquest reaches the Mathura and the Yamuna and beyond, up to the Shunga capital of Patliputra, which is Patna, in what present-day Bihar. And some scholars argue that Menander I was the same figure as Milinda in Buddhist scripture and had converted to Buddhism. And his coins are very common, and they were struck in bronze and silver. And here is a silver coin of a drachma of Menander I Sota, struck between 155 and 130 BC. There's a heroic bust on the obverse with his title Basileus Soteru Menanderu. So King Menander Soteru, the savior. And then the same kind of titles given in Korosti script. And here is Athena from Greek mythology, known as Greek Athena Alkidemu, defender of the people. And with the rise of kind of Greek power, at the same time, you start seeing their influence kind of reaching adjacent regions, such as in Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand, where the Kunindas began imitating their coins. And the obverse of these coins depict the Greek goddess Lakshmi holding a lotus flower with a legend in Prakrit stating the great king Amogabhuti, king of the Kunundas. And the reverse depicts a stupa with the Buddhist Sri Ratna, the legend in Korosti script stating the great king Amogabhuti of the Kunundas. So here is Lakshmi. And then here is the Buddhist Sri Ratna here. And this was struck around the 1st century BC. And by the 1st century BC, Greek rule began to wane in Punjab. And Philoxenus was the last Indo-Greek king to effectively rule land between the Hindu Kush and Punjab. And his coins continued to be struck in the form of bilingual silver drachmas, with Greek on the obverse and Korosti on the reverse. And after Philoxenus' rule came to an end, the Indo-Greek kingdom fragmented and lost land to the Indo-Greek, to the Indian kingdoms in the east and the Inter-Scythians, and the Kushans and the Indo-Parthians north and west. Among the last rulers of the Indo-Greek kingdom were Hermaios and Strata III. And while the former rulers coined with Yutzi, they imitated the Yutzi, the later the Kushans. And the Indo-Greek kingdom finally came to an end in the 1st century AD with the invasion of the Indo-Scythians. And here is a silver tetradrachma Philoxenus in the Indo-Greek kingdom, struck around the 1st century BC. Again, kind of Basileus Philoxenu, and then the same given here in the reverse with the king on horseback. And here's a much cruder silver coin of Strata II with Strata III, father and son, struck in the Indo-Greek kingdom in the 1st century AD. Very crude, kind of low-quality silver. One can barely make out the inscriptions on it. And here is a bronze Kushan in imitation of a silver tetradrachma of Hermaios in the 1st century AD. So Zeus depicted here, and then King Hermaios depicted on the obverse. And I'm going to look at the Indo-Scythians now. So the Indo-Scythians invaded India after defeating the Greco-Bactrians in northern Afghanistan. And they'd been displaced from their homeland in Central Asia by the Yutzi, the Kushans. And their conquests were initially in Kashmir and Punjab. and their coinage was strongly influenced by the Indo-Greeks. And Indo-Scythian coinage was kind of first struck by mouse, and these were in silver, and they closely imitated the Indo-Greeks with bilingual legends in Greek and the Krosi script, reading the King of Kings, the Great Mouse. And here's a silver tetradrachma of mouse of the Indo-Scythian kingdom, struck between the 90 and 60 BC. Again, you can see the Greek influence. And Indo-Scythian rule expanded and grew to encompass territory from Punjab and Mathura, with brief campaigns in Gujarat, Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh, and Bihar. And the legacy can be seen in Sistan, which comprises southern Afghanistan and eastern Iran. And Sistan is derived from Sakastan, which is the land of the Saka or Scythians. And the most common Indo-Scythian coinage was that of Aziz I and Aziz II, again struck in a bilingual style based on the earlier Indo-Greek coinage. And here's the territory of Indo-Scythians. As you can see, it's quite a bit, quite a great extent from kind of the edges of Iran, eastern edge of Iran, which is now the Sistan region, right into Afghanistan, past Kandahar, right up to the Indus River and Punjab, and right up to Mathura in Uttar Pradesh, and then brief campaigns in Bhattiputra, and then also kind of influence in Gujarat and Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh. And here's the silver tetradrachma of Aziz I, struck between 48 and 25 BC. So again, you can see the Greek influence here, with the king on horseback on the obverse, and then on the reverse, a deity. And under Aziz I's successor, Azilis, the Indo-Scythian rule began declining with the establishment of the northern satraps around Mathura. And Rajavula is considered to be the first main ruler of the northern satraps, and his silver coinage imitated Greek coinage. And he would soon become a vassal of the Indo-Parthians, who would rule Punjab. So we're going to look at some of his coins as well. And here is a coin of Rajavula, a very crude silver, but not pure silver. Very kind of degraded Greek style, but this is around 10th century AD. And you can see the bust of him and then a deity on the reverse. So following the same kind of standard as established by the Indo-Greeks. And he and his kingdom would later come under the influence of the Indo-Parthians, and their kingdom was founded by a man called Gondophares in the 1st century BC. And he was a member of the Parthian house of Surin, which is one of the main ruling families of the Parthian Empire in Iran. And Gondophares had been given Sakastan, present-day Sistan, to defend against invasions by the Indo-Scythians in Ute Sea, later as the Kushans. And he managed to repel the Indo-Scythians and went on to establish his own kingdom. And he, after invading the kingdom of Punjab, and his coinage imitated that of the Parthians to the west, with a portrait on the obverse and a Greek letters on the reverse, which itself was based on imitation of Greek coinage. So more kind of a purely Greek style. This is the territory of the Indo-Parthian kingdom. So from Afghanistan, from Helmand, Kandahar, and numerous provinces in Afghanistan, north to Kabul, and then down into Punjab, and then kind of southwest into what is now Sindh. And here is a drachma of Gondophares. You can see him wearing a headband, similar in the Greek style, and then a kind of Parthian tunic and a necklace, and then kind of quite blunted Greek here on the reverse. It's difficult to tell, but I think you just about make out King of Kings. And then the king seated, I think holding a cup in this case, being crowned by the Greek goddess of victory. And the Indo-Parthians are remembered as kind of patrons of Buddhism. So under them, Buddhism became really entrenched even further. And the Indo-Parthians sent missionaries to China and helped to establish Buddhism there. And by the reign of the Indo-Parthian king Pacorus, Indo-Parthian coinage strongly resembled that of earlier Indo-Scythian and Indo-Greek coins, with a portrait of the ruler on Greek script and a reverse with Korosti script depicting the Greek goddess of victory, Nike. Eventually, the Indo-Parthian would lose their lands in India to the Kushan Empire in the 1st century AD and were completely subjugated by the Sasanian Empire in their Afghanistan territories by the early 3rd century AD. And this is a coin of Pacorus, with him wearing a headband and like a large bushy hair, and then with a Parthian tunic. And then here you can see the Greek goddess Nike holding a wreath of victory. And this was struck in Arakosia Mint, which is present-day Kandahar in Afghanistan, struck around the 2nd century AD. And meanwhile, while it's all going on north of India, you had the Western satraps, and their kingdom was found in Gujarat, and Sindh and Madhya Pradesh, and they seceded from the Indo-Scythian Empire, and their empire was kind of longest lived out of the Indo-Scythian kingdoms, long outliving northern satraps, and they moved from bilingual legend on the coinage to kind of more blended Greek and Korosti. And I find the coinage of Nahapana in the 1st century AD to be particularly beautiful. And his coinage influenced the Satavahanas in the Deccan region, and his coinage was overstruck there. And the Western satraps continued to rule for several centuries as vassals of the Kushans until much later being conquered by the Gupta Empire in the 405 AD, who would imitate their coinage. And here's a silver drachma of Nahapana, the Western satraps. You can see very beautiful coin with the king depicted very well, very clearly on the obverse, and then on the reverse you have Korosti script. And here's a silver drachma of Nahapana, which was overstruck in the Satyavana Empire around the 2nd century AD. And you can see the kind of Buddhist Triratna here, and again, there's 4 circles joined together, this typical symbol of the Satyavana Empire. And you can see much later in the 4th century AD, you start seeing that become much more stylized, less realistic. So it's much more stylized depiction, in this case of Simhasena, the king of one of the later kings of the Western satraps. And then kind of Greek influence completely gone by this stage. It's more Indian in style. And these are quite scarce coins. This is struck around the 4th century AD. And the Western satraps would become vassals of the Kushan Empire, who I'm going to look at in the last kind of stage of this talk. And the Kushan Empire were the leading tribe of the Yutzi tribal confederation, a tribe which had been expelled from China by the Zhongnu in the 2nd century BC. And they migrated west from China, pushing the Scythians to invade India. And they absorbed the Greco-Bactrian kingdom north of the Hindu Kush mountains, and they adopted Greek script in their coinage and used it to write the Bactrian language, while retaining Korosti script as before. And the earliest Kushan coinage is attributed to King Heraeus, or Kojula Cadphisus. And these consist of silver coiners struck with Greek legend stating, of the tyrant Heraeus, the Kushan. And the numismatist Joe Cribb has attributed these coins to Kojula Cadphisus. And here's a silver tetradrachma that I described. So this is the portrait of either King Heraeus or Kojula Cadphisus on the obverse, and kind of still much more kind of Greek style with the portrait on the obverse. And then the king on horseback here, on reverse, being crowned by the Greek goddess of victory, Nike. Still kind of Greek influence. And here it says, Tiranu, the tyrant, Heraeus, the tyrant, Heraeus. And after Heraeus, we have a more concrete chronology, thanks to the work of Nicholas M. Williams at the London School of Oriental and African Studies, whose translation of the Rabatak inscription cites Kojula Cadphisus. And he struck copper coinage And he actually waged war against Indo-Parthians, but unfortunately this went badly, and he lost territory to them. And it was his son, Vima Takta, who was able to recover his lands of his father and adopt the title Sota Megas, which is a Greek title, meaning the great savior. And Vima Takta expanded Kushan power from Afghanistan into Punjab, particularly in Taxila. And he also minted bronze coinage, again with bilingual legends in Greek script and Kharosthi. You start looking at their coins as well. And here is a very interesting bronze Kushan imitation of Roman Dinaris of Augustus, struck under Kujula Cadphisus. And you can see here on the obverse is a portrait of the Roman Emperor Augustus. And then on the reverse, you can see a depiction of, and then on the reverse you can see the king kind of seated on his throne. And here is a bronze heterodrachma of Vima Takta, struck in the Kushan Empire in the 1st century AD. So you can see here the king holding a baton and wearing a crown, a radiate crown, and then his sigil or tamga behind him. And then here again, the king, possibly holding a baton or scepter, on horseback, again with his sigil. Apologies, I'm running a bit over. Sorry about that. We're getting near the end, so sorry about that. The beginnings of, and now under Vima Takta, we finally start seeing the first true kind of gold coinage struck in India. So Vima Takta was succeeded by Vima Cadphisus, who minted the first gold coins in India, and they're highly prized for their artistry and craftsmanship. And Vima Cadphisus saw the expansion of Kushan rule further into India, where he defeated northern satraps ruler Sodasas in Mathura. And it's believed much of the Kushan gold supply may have actually come from trade with the Roman Empire, as the Kushan Empire was ideally placed between the Parthian Empire in Iran and the Han Empire in China. And his bronze coinage often depicts as Vima Cadphisus on the obverse with the Greek script and Lord Shiva and Nandi on the reverse with Kharosthi script. And here is a gold dinar of Vima Cadphisus, very beautiful gold coin. So here's Vima Cadphisus standing with a rod or baton in his right hand on a cloud. And then here it says Cadphisus Basileus, king. Cadphisus, king. And then here's a deity standing here. And then you can see this is the Buddhist Triratna. And then his sigil again. And here's a bronze tetradrachma of Vima Cadphisus of the Kushan Empire in the 2nd century AD. And this is the king standing in a tunic wearing boots. And then he's making offering to, in the Zoroastrian style. And then the Trishul here, representing the Hinduism. And then the Club of Hercules representing the Greek mythology. So you have several religions being depicted here on one coin. I can count about 4. So Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, Greek paganism, and then Buddhism. And you can see his sigil again. And this is Lord Shiva and Nandi. And again, Cadphisus Basileus, Cadphisus king. And under Vima Cadphisus' successor, Kanishka the Great, the Kushan Empire reached its peak. So it stretched from Herat in Afghanistan to Varanasi in India, and perhaps even included Patliputra or Patna in Bihar. And Kanishka is remembered as the great patron of Buddhism, and he built a giant stupa which once dominated the city of Peshawar. And his copper coinage had been found in Varanasi as part of a coin hoard in about 1890, and as far afield as Champaran and Dabagan districts in Bihar. And his copper coinage has also been found in Kositana in Jharkhand, and Kayema in Odisha, as well as Mathura, Delhi, and Ambala. And here is a gold dinar of Kanishka, struck in the 2nd century AD. And this is actually one of the earliest depictions of the Buddha on a coin. So you can see here it says Bodho, which means the Buddha. And this pose is very, very familiar to anyone who's seen a statue of the Buddha with his palm kind of stretched out. And this is the sigil here of Kanishka, and then Kanishka holding a spear and making an offering to the Zoroastrian faith. And again, here is a bronze coin of Kanishka the Great, struck in the 2nd century AD, with the king wearing a tunic and riding boots with a spear, making offerings to the Zoroastrian religion. And then on the reverse, Lord Shiva, and written here is Oesho, which was the Bactrian, which was a religion that was practiced by the Kushans, of the Bactrian equivalent of Lord Shiva. And again, the sigil of Kanishka. And after Kanishka came King Huvishka, who's chiefly remembered as consolidating Kushan law, and his bronze and gold coinage are abundant. And the most common bronze coins found are those depicting Huvishka on an elephant with a deity on the reverse. And many of his gold coins depict him, the king Huvishka, on the obverse and a deity on the reverse. And his bronze coinage has been found in Delhi, Mathura, as well as Basani, which is northwest of Varanasi. And his gold coinage has been found in fields as Nalanda and Bodh Gaya districts in Bihar, which may indicate that the Kushan Empire reached even there. And here is a bronze heterodrachma of Huvishka, struck in the 2nd century AD. And on the obverse, you can see the king on an elephant. And then on the reverse, this is Ardasho, which is a Bactrian deity, standing with the horn of plenty. And then here is here's his sigil again, kind of royal symbol. And these are quite common. And this particular coin belonged to a historian called known as James Seaver. And here is a gold dinar of Huvishka, struck in the 2nd century AD in the Kushan Empire. You see the king dressed very elaborately in a robe, holding a spear here, and then a very, very nice, beautiful depiction of Lord Shiva here, holding a chakra and other things in his hands. Very beautiful coin. And after Huvishka, Kushan coinage continued to be struck under his successor, Vasudeva I, in the late 2nd century AD. And Vasudeva I's coinage was much more Indian in style, with references to Hindu deities such as Lord Shiva. However, the Kushan Empire entered a slow period of decline as the early 3rd century saw the Kushans lose land to the rising power of the Sasanian Empire in Iran. In the east, dynasties such as the Yodhya in Haryana and the Mitra dynasty of Ayodhya began asserting their independence. And under Kanishka II, the Kushan Empire finally lost land to the Sasanian Empire, who conquered their lands north of the Hindu Kush mountains. And this decline will continue until the fragmentation and final destruction of the Kushan Empire in the reign of Kipanada in the 4th century AD. And the last Kushan influence coinage in India was that of the Kidarites in Kashmir, who struck debased gold coinage in the late 5th century AD. And the Kidarites were a Hunnic tribe, which retreated to Kashmir after their defeat by the Sasanians in what is now Afghanistan. And with the Kidarites, this is the kind of final end of Greek influence coinage in India after more than 600 years. I'm just going to finish with an illustration, depiction of the actual coins that from the very end of the Kushan Empire. So this is a gold coin of Vasudeva I. Again, very similar, struck in the late 2nd century AD, with the king dressed in military regalia or costume, and again making offerings to the Zoroastrian faith, and then holding what looks like a trishul in this case. And then on the reverse is Lord Shiva holding a trishul and with Nandi, and then again the sigil of Vasudeva I. And here is a bronze coin of Vasudeva I of the Kushan Empire, making offerings again, and then Lord Shiva and Nandi. And a similar kind of scene again with Kanishka II. So again, very much a continuation. And by this time, the Kushan Empire started becoming quite weak by the 3rd century AD. And then his bronze coinage was much more stylized, so less realistic. So with the king in the tunic, and then Nana, this is Nana, one of the Bactrian deities. it was this coin that formed the basis of later gold coins. So this is the coin of the last kind of Kushan ruler, King Kipanada, from the 4th century AD. And again, the Greek influence is almost gone, actually. So there's no Greek script at all by this stage, and much more stylized, dressed very Indian style, with the crowns very Indian in style, making offering to an altar, which possibly is a Zoroastrian altar, and then the Bactrian goddess Nana here. And then this formed the basis of the final kind of Kushan influenced coinage, which was that of the Kedarites of Kashmir. And this was struck by King Inayat in the late 5th century AD. And these were often debased. And at that, of that slide, now we reach the end. So thank you. Apologies for running slightly over.
Thank you very much. You have, in a very elaborate manner, presented the panorama of coins, from punch mark coins to different silver coins to the gold coins of Kanishka period. So from Mahajanapad to Kanishk to Kushan period, in a brief time, I should say, although we have spent more than 1 hour, but the period which you covered was such a large period, and the deliberations, the presentation was so elaborate and exhaustive and very easily understandable that from very beginning to the end, I hope and I think my students also, they were very attentively listening to whatever you presented. And really, your presentation opened something like a curiosity to ask several questions, not from you, of course from you, but also it opened questions for one's own understanding, one's own questioning as to how the Indian culture as such emerged, and something like a part of the Indian culture, like how in the very beginning the religious depictions were less, it seems, in the point mark coins, and how gradually the religious symbols appear, and they sometimes in the end speak of assimilation of the different religious systems, as you very well mentioned, how Zoroastrianism and Buddhism and Hinduism, like Lord Shiva, and of course the Greek gods they find mentioned. It was something like an assimilation process going on. If one may say it was a cultural synthesis also. So people may react in a different manner. But now I thank you very much sincerely from the bottom of my heart, Azeem ji, Azeem Sahab, Azeem Ali Sahab, and we are very proud of you because in one sense that you have a lineage from Varanasi. Your forefathers were in Varanasi, and then I came to have an interaction with you because you were in search of the places where they were in the beginning of the 20th century, and then anyhow you got their address. So, and I should say it was a very good presentation, very excellent, and very, I should say, engrossing. We all were stuck to whatever you were saying. So now the house is open for the students to ask some questions or some expressions or some observations. So they are welcome to ask questions. Azeem ji, do you understand Urdu or Hindi?
Unfortunately, not really. I'm more actually I speak. Just one sec. Actually, I'll just it's okay if I'll just go to the washroom quickly and then I'll just be back. Sorry, I just spoke for an hour. And then,
please have a break of 5 minutes.
Yeah, and you can think about also your students can think of their questions.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So when you come, before that, I'm just discussing my students. So I think you would join again within 5 minutes. Okay?
Yeah, 5 minutes. Yeah, sure. Okay.
So now I ask my students who are there listening to the lecture, जो हमारे विद्यार्थी लोग सब सुन रहे थे पूरा लेक्चर शुरू से आखिर तक, तो उन लोगों का अपना ऑब्जर्वेशन, दे में कम अप विद देयर ऑब्जर्वेशंस, अपनी बातें कह सकते हैं. यद्यपि आपने देखा कि अजीम अली साहब, ही इज वेल इन इंग्लिश. He, although I was thinking that he might be speaking in Urdu and Hindi both, because his forefathers were from Varanasi. But anyhow, because of his being in England and through speaking English, so he spoke in English very well. Now I invite my students to come up with their observations in a very general way, not in a very formal manner, in a very general manner. Whatever they think, they feel, they may come up with their observations. I invite them. आलोक जी, first I invite you. मैं आलोक जी आपसे कह रहा हूँ, आप बोलिए आपको कैसा लगा लेक्चर. आलोक, are you there? आलोक जी, मिस्टर आलोक. हाँ आलोक, आप कहाँ चले गए थे?
जी
कहीं चले गए थे क्या आप?
नहीं यहीं पे हूँ सर. माइक ऑन किया था तो टेक्निकल कुछ इश्यूज. सॉरी सर.
अच्छा, कोई बात नहीं. मैं कह रहा हूँ कि आपने
पहले आपको प्रणाम करना चाहूंगा और डॉक्टर अजीम अली सर को थैंक यू सो मच सर फॉर गिविंग अ वैल्यूबल टाइम एंड वंडरफुल लेक्चर फ्रॉम योर साइड.
थैंक यू.
Alok ji is a Bachelor of Engineering, B.Tech. He has done B.Tech, Bachelor of Engineering in Technology, Bachelor of Technology in Computer Sciences. So he is our technical help in the department. So just I asked him how he felt. Now Alok ji, please say whatever you are willing to say, what you felt while hearing the lecture, and then the other students who are there would be saying something.
Sure.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. And your presentation was very good, sir. And I just seen each and every picture of your whatever you present is there. And lots of pictures, and on the coins there is a signature like a sign of Mughals. So that is very wonderful to know about with your from your side.
Yes, you are willing to say that there were signatures from the bankers. वो सब बैंकर लोग थे, वो लोग अपना एक सिग्नेचर करते थे. There were bankers, Azeem Ali. I am saying that there were bankers who were putting their marks as such to something like an identity of the coin mark coins.
To show that they were trusted, to say that it's gone through this person and it's good to use. Yes.
Now I invite some of other students to come up with their query.
Can I ask question?
Yes, please.
Sir, Mr. Azeem Ali sir, please, Doctor sir, please, could you please elaborate some type of word about the gold dinar? Could you please repeat again one word?
Shall I go back to if you want to see the slide again, I'd be happy to do that. Or if you want to see the picture of it again, that
yes,
is fine.
Actually the word dinar was used in the very end. And we know that dinar is a very native Indian word. So maybe his query was about how dinar, yes, you have shown it.
This is the first one.
How he was willing to know. Actually, in a general manner, people were thinking that dinar is something like a word from West Asia. But the way it is pronounced here in the context of the coins, it appears it is a very native word and of Indian origin. So, Alok, what were you saying?
Yeah, so it may, I mean, it's not actually known exactly. I'm actually unsure of the etymology, the origin of this, because the dinar also, because the Kushans also had Greek coins coming in, Roman coins coming into the empire through trade, and these coins are known as denarius. And obviously, the word dinar, which you may be familiar with in West Asia, comes from the word the denarius, which was a Greek silver coin.
Yes.
And the dinar, the origin of it, I'm actually not, because I've also commented on that, because it might be a shortened form of dinara, which is because often there's an A on the end, but I'm not actually sure personally where that came from. It's not very, to me, it's not clear, because obviously the dinar traditionally is considered to be a derivation of the Roman denarius, which
yes,
would have seen with merchants.
Actually, the earlier coins were called kasharpans, as you mentioned very much.
Yes.
Kasharpans.
Yes.
And also you mentioned about ratti and masa.
Yes.
And ratti and masa, they have been understood in India, and as also you also propounded, they are the units of weight, the weighing units. Ratti and masa are the weighing units. So generally when people deal with the things which are very small in weight, then they use ratti and masa. These days also, when in any traditional medicine shop, which is called Ayurvedic shop, if you visit,
Yes.
they give you medicines weighing in ratti and masa, like that.
Yes.
So in the beginning you use ratti and masa. So now I'm asking my students to come up with their queries.
Sure.
Hello, sir. I have a question.
Yes.
Sir, first of all, thank you very much for the great lecture. And sir, we find seals in the Harappan civilization. So can we call them those seals as proto coins, because they are also used for trade purpose? So can we call them as proto coins?
The issue with the seals is that because they have because we can't read the language, right? I mean, there's no universal acceptance of what that language is, so we don't know what they actually say. But those, because obviously those stone seals have been found even beyond Indus Valley, even further west in Iran and in Central Asia. But we don't. I mean, we just simply don't know. And obviously, because they're not precious stones, so I'm not sure what the value was. Because as I described earlier, obviously the Kushans, the Indus Valley civilization towards the end, later period, also began trading in and and gold. So that might have been much more useful for trade. But the seals, one theory is that the seals might have been just to verify a transaction. So once and goods have been exchanged, you would, make an impression maybe on clay to kind of verify. And often there's kind of holes behind them, which, I mean, I don't have if I can turn I can actually show, I can show one. I can show one if that helps, so you can see that. I can turn my camera on and you can see one. Just so you can see what a Kushan seal, what a Indus Valley seal looks like, and you can see the holes as well. So you can, if that's okay, I can actually show, so you can illustrate it. Just 1 minute. See if I can can you see me? Just stop. Can you? Stop presenting. Yeah, I think you can see me now.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so this is actually this is the Indus Valley seal. Oh, whoops. This is one of them. So you can see, I think it's easier than just showing a picture. So you can see that they're made out of kind of I think soapstone, and it's not really known what this might be a little fire thing. Like, I'm not sure what this is, to be honest, because nobody knows what these say, because the script has eluded scholars for a century. And then if you look on the back, you see these holes. So there might have been like a string on a necklace, and somebody might have worn it like this. They might have worn it like this, and then when they were in the market, or they might have worn it, and then in the market, they might have just pressed on a seal to make an impression. And this is known as a unicorn type. So this might be what they were used for. We don't really know. So, I mean, unfortunately, until the language is deciphered, my answers, unfortunately, we just can't say for certain. So that's what I can say. Unfortunately, sorry I couldn't answer, but because people have been trying to decipher this for 100 years.
Yes, very excellently you explained. And if there is any more question, one may come up with the question or observation.
Yes. And actually, I can show you some of the coins, what they actually look like. Like what they actually look like in hand. If you ever want to see, if you have any questions about the coins, I have some of them, so you can actually show, so you can see what they look like.
It would be very wonderful and welcome that if you could show some coins exactly in a physical form, because we have been in the habit of, we have been looking through pictures.
Yeah. So like this is one of the coins that I showed. This is the Kasapana of the Kasala kingdom. This is actually one of the coins I used in the lecture. So they're very thin. You can see how thin they are.
Mr. Azeem Ali, may I request you to kindly have a second session of the lecture next day, because we have already spent, I think, 1 hour and 30 minutes. So subsequent questions and the observations, and the students would also have the opportunity to think. I think more time they will get to ask you questions and come up with their observations. So, with your permission and kind consent, I simply say that let us have another lecture or question answer session tomorrow at 2 p.m. Is it okay for you?
Yeah, I think we can have a discussion tomorrow at 2 p.m. How about that?
That would be something like a discussion. And in the meanwhile, my students would be ready after having studied more and more about the coins, and then they would be in a position to ask questions. Okay. And
what I can do, I can send my lecture to everyone. Send it so then they can just go over it and then think about any questions.
Of course, I would ask Alok ji to provide you the WhatsApp link, which is the link of the students in a combination. So then you can send that to the students so that they can study it, and then they may come up with their something like to present in the question answer session.
Yeah, sure, sir, sure.
So I would be giving you, or Alok ji would be giving you the WhatsApp link where you would be sending it. Okay.
Sure.
So with these words, I again express my thanks to my friend Dr. Azeem Ali ji, and I hope that we would be again meeting tomorrow in a question answer session.
Sure.
Thank you, and thanks all the students.
Thank you so much, sir.
And thanks. And now I take your permission to end the class. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Bye, sir. Thank you so much, sir.